because it's easy once you have identified what it is that you're trying to change and where it came from.
Yeah.
But until you recognize, like, is it from a parent, a caregiver, a peer, a teacher, like, because we take these slivers of little seeming like innocuous seeming little scenes in our lives, and we extrapolate from that like this whole big rigid structure. And it's just like, well, no, maybe that teacher was just having a crappy day and has said some
Yeah.
off-putting BS. But instead we're just like, well, if I ask for something that I want, then I'm not going to get it. Therefore, I must never ask for what I want. That's bad.
Hello, hello, and welcome back to Journey of a Fearless Female. My name is Paola Rosser, and I am your host. My guest is Mel Trumble, Melissa Trumble, Mel for short. She is a life-transforming force and the founder of ZFG Living. As a life coach, speaker, podcast host, and best-selling author, Mel's mission is to empower individuals to unleash their authentic joy. Drawing from her journey of overcoming abuse, traumas, and limiting beliefs, Mel shares insights and wisdom with her humor, candor, and a deep understanding of what it takes to live a life at its fullest. Through her life coaching programs, podcasts, and the big book of Bad Ideas series, Mel leads the way for people everywhere to heal their past, challenge their limiting beliefs, and create a life of joy and authenticity. Everybody, please welcome Mel. Hi. I'm so excited to have you.
Paola. Many thanks for having me on this fab podcast.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so tell us about your fearless female journey. Where did it all begin?
Let's go back in time.
I know. For those people who weren't born in the 80s and 90s, that's from a reference from Wayne's World.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I grew up one of 9 kids, and you'll be shocked to know that resources were not aplenty. And neither was the patience and, good, loving parenting that is so in vogue now. My parents got married at 18 and 19. So they started having children at 19 and 20 and just kept adding to it. And I am neurodivergent, which was not a thing back in the 70s. And so I was, just a heck of a handful, and the house was chaos incarnate. And I, go through life making all my mistakes, setting just my life on fire at every turn. And after, my second divorce, which happened, I was sitting there and I was like, there's a common thread. What is the common thread?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's me. I'm creating these horribly chaotic households because it's home.
Yes.
This is home. And granted, this is decades of therapy in. I'm in my 40s for the second divorce, and I started going to therapy in 7th freaking grade. And
wow.
Yeah, my school sent me. And it's therapy is great and it's incredibly helpful, and I wouldn't be alive without it. That and meds. Give a shout out to our psychiatric meds. And but we also have to realize that if you don't change fundamentally how you see yourself, then none of the other good stuff is going to happen. So I can understand why I'm effed up.
Yeah.
And that's imperative, I think. And I also have to rewrite that subconscious script. And I didn't get to understanding that until I was in my 40s. After the second divorce, I found mindset work.
Wow.
And I'm just like, what? I mean, I'm also, of course, under medical care and seeing a therapist and, doing all the tools that I know already. And then I find the mindset work, and it was just like the pace exploded. And I did taxes for decades. Shocker. Not exactly fulfilling, but so I started, I wrote my book, I started coaching on the side, and just sharing this information, because I'm like, y'all, like, save yourself some freaking decades. And so that's kind of the drum that I'm beating, because you've got whatever your flavor is it childhood abuse? Is it domestic violence? Is it homelessness? There's all these different things that happen. And then you've got natural disasters, which are coming fast and furious. plague just adds a new dimension to it. But I grew up in New Orleans, and
Ooh,
so it was like Hurricane Palooza.
yeah. Before we get into what you're doing now, I wanted to unpack a little bit about what you said earlier. So you were one of nine.
Mhm.
Your parents were both super young. What number were you on number nine?
Second.
They were second. So the oldest are usually kind of like seen as the people who have to take care of the other ones, right? The younger versions.
Yes.
And also, please, for the people who are listening and watching on YouTube, what would be neurodivergent for people who don't or have never heard of that term?
Oh, absolutely. So neurodivergent covers a host of different things, and it's basically someone who's wired differently. So if you're on the spectrum, if, some people will use it also to describe people who have a depression, anxiety, ADHD. Hi, I'm there, all those
Mm,
things. And it just means that the reason I bring it up, the typical parenting tools are not going to be effective to
okay.
someone who's crawling out of their skin from anxiety and is desperately trying to climb a tree to get away from people because they're overstimulated,
Mm.
because there's
And
too much going on.
and when did they figure this out about you? Like, what was the point where the your parent or your teacher or your guardian was like, we need to do something more because obviously, like you said, the normal parenting isn't working on you.
Um, so I grew up going to a Catholic school, like a neighborhood Catholic school, and because I'm 54 now, so you're talking about the 70s. So
Mm-hmm.
I was a problem. I was a behavioral problem. And so that is ultimately what got the school to say, your whole family needs to go to therapy and she needs to continue. And I write about that in hopefully a hilarious way in my first book, because family therapy, it started out, you had the whole family there. And so you're going to shoehorn, I think there were only 8 kids at that time. So you're going to shoehorn 10 people, plus 11 with the therapist, into this tiny office. And they're trying to figure out, like, what are the dynamics that are leading to me acting out. And in the meantime, I'm in a situation that I would literally have dismantled that building to get out of that room because there were just
Mm,
too many people.
yeah.
So, but the diagnoses came as an adult. And, my parents were very flawed and they had grown up in some pretty horrific circumstances. And so there was, generational work, right? And what
Mm-hmm.
that is when your parents were molested, abused, whether physically or, emotionally, kind of goes with the territory, right? Because they were boomers. And
And they were young, very young.
so young, so young. And I think that that's a common, at least literarily, it's a common trope, right? The young people marry to get out of their own dysfunctional house of
Mhm.
origin. And then in the stories, of course, they create a beautiful, loving home. And our house was loving, but my parents were deeply flawed.
Mm. When did you feel like that you were different from your brothers and sisters?
Well, that's the fun thing with genetics. We were like half and half. So, there were some of us who were just like, yes, we are our people. And then others were like, why do you want to talk to all these people? And how are you so satisfied just sitting on that chair? Um, and that's the hyperactive part of it, is that, if you see me rocking, or, like, you can't, I love video, man. Zoom is my best friend because you have no
Mhm.
idea what my hands are doing. I am fiddling, I am moving.
Yeah.
Um, but it's that feeling of other, and I don't think that you have to have a neurological difference to feel other.
Yeah.
You can,
Absolutely. Everyone feels other.
everyone feels other, like
Yeah.
imposter syndrome. It should just be human syndrome.
Yeah. I always felt like I was other. I'm one of seven, and I was the seventh child, and I always felt other. Like I always felt like I didn't belong or I wasn't the same. And I would look at my siblings and the abuse would happen and I would be like, how come you're not as hurt as me? Like I was emotionally distraught. And they
Hmm.
were like, my sister would get a spanking and she was up and running within an hour after she had her fit, and I was like emotionally broken for weeks, months, even years, and for her it was just like, ah, it happened, move on, like, you know what I mean? So it's so different. We are all very different and very unique.
Yes.
And, even now I'm starting to learn that there are some people that don't even have an internal monologue. 50 to 70% of us don't have an internal. I'm like, really? There's people out there that don't have that
What must that
incessant
be like?
voice. I know, I would love that. I mean, when I reincarnate, can I come back as one of those?
And then
Um,
you'd feel out of your skin because you'd just be like,
yeah.
something's wrong. Something's very, very wrong.
Oh, yeah. So when you started to go to therapy, and what was there, because this is the 70s, 80s, right? So I
Mhm,
mean, there really wasn't that much talk about mental health. There really wasn't that much
mhm.
like help, really. So what was their protocol for you?
Well, luckily, this woman, she was pretty good and she gave me strategies.
Oh, good.
She taught me what I can do, how I
Hmm.
can breathe, how I can, if I'm feeling like that, what can I do to distract myself, to just to make it better. And so then, of course, it was Catholic Charities was the source of that. So that was a limited number of sessions. And then I found a therapist who would trade babysitting for therapy. So I'd ride my bike
Wow.
over the I was very resourceful.
That's
I knew
very
because
resourceful.
I knew it helped.
Yeah.
And I also, the good thing that I had going on for me is that my memory was long and I can remember before I was being abused, being just very happy and
Hmm.
just so joyful and just so excited about everything, the wind, the leaves, the sounds, whatever. And so I knew that I could live in a way that it was not that misery, like you said, like being wrecked for weeks after something happened, or
Yeah.
or just ruminating on things over and over again. I knew it didn't have to be like that.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm so happy that you found somebody that was willing to do a trade for babysitting. So how did you discover mindset work, and how old were you, and what was your first, like, I know, like, video or person
Hey,
or guru?
oh, let me tell you, and that did not happen until I was literally surfing the internet because I'm like
So after your second divorce.
second divorce. Yeah. Like
Wow.
I found mindset work. I got my shiitake together, and then
The shiitake.
I wrote my book. And from there, people were emailing me and they were just like, this is so helpful because I put calls to action in the book just because I was writing the book I wish I would have had.
Yeah.
Because my whole thing is if you're just like heading straight up noon, right? You're just going straight to hell in a handcart. And
Yeah.
if you can intervene with someone like that, if I can as coach, that and just tick them over, it puts them off on a whole different path.
Absolutely.
And
To me,
it
it's crazy
shaves
that you were in therapy for that long and no one mentioned mindset work.
not explaining it as replacing the subconscious script. Nope.
Oh,
Nobody no pretends.
nobody
I
no
went to
pretense. I love your little sayings.
ah,
That
thanks.
is incredible. Like, for me, but you know what? It's the same thing. I was in therapy for a very long time, and I love therapy. I'm not going to knock it. I think everyone should
Absolutely.
start at therapy. If you're
Hmm.
about to start your healing, journey, or you're in this place of existential crisis and you're like, I need to figure something out, definitely start at therapy, because I think that gives us all a place to finally have someone hear you, you know,
Yes.
to someone really hear you. That's not going to feel defensive. Like, whenever I try to bring anything up with my family or my sisters, they got very defensive. They got
Mhm.
very, like, no, you don't feel that way. Well, I don't feel that way. Well, that's you. I feel this way, and, or they would invalidate your feelings, or they would try to manipulate the situation and make you, gaslight you into believing that it wasn't that way. So it's nice to finally be in a situation where you can have a safe space to talk, and it's going to stay there, and it's not,
Yeah.
and no one's going to get hurt by what you said. So therapy is a great place to start. But
And if
eventually,
I may interject,
sure.
also what I always say about therapy, and this is just the benefit, you have to explain what happened and how you feel about it to someone who does not know you and will not fill in the blanks.
Yes.
And that is one of the most beneficial things, in my opinion, because people who know you, whether they're family, friends, coworkers, anyone, they have an idea of who you are and they
Yeah.
know where you're coming from generally, or they think they do. And so they're gonna like fill in some gaps, whereas the therapist will be like, tell me more about that. I don't understand that. What, da 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 da.
Yes. Exactly, because they see you. My family always used to say that I was like possessed by the devil, or I was like dramatic or
I'm
crazy,
sorry.
because I was like, I had a lot of tantrums, and I was like, really, I would hit myself, I would pull my hair. They said I was crazy. And now I look back, and I look back at my little girl, and it's like, she was overstimulated. She was dealing with a lot of emotions and adult situations that she could not process. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
she's going to act like that. Like, of course, she's going to retaliate that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people don't understand is the idea of why your children is acting that way. Like I listen to Marissa Peer a lot. She's founder of RTT, which is called Rapid Transformational Therapy. And she says, instead of when child is acting up, instead of, getting mad at them or telling them they shouldn't feel that way, or they should, get back into line or spanking them, ask them what is going on.
Right.
Why are you acting like this? Like, what is going on? And
Mm-hmm.
most of the time the child is acting out for a reason, not because they're just trying to be a pain in your ass.
No, of
Right.
course not. That
Right.
doesn't benefit anyone.
I know, but going back to like about therapy, it just baffles me that after all those years, not one person suggested to look up mindset work, or that, there's a program that is running you and that you could easily reprogram it.
It just takes consistency. It is so not rocket science. Honestly, mindset work is so much easier than like social skills.
Yes. So tell me about that day that you were scrolling on YouTube. Was it YouTube? And
Uh,
who came up that like
okay,
just made
so
your mind blow?
I'm a big like DuckDuckGo search engine fan. I'm on Firefox. I don't like being marketed to, right? And so I'm looking in and I'm just like, well, this is some, low grade conspiracy garbage, and then I started like coming across some of the more consistent thing, just constantly saying like, do this reprogram, like you said, reprogram. And I was just like, well, puff puff give, that makes sense, let's try it. And literally I went, find somebody that I kind of seem like, okay, they don't seem like they're gonna take me to Guyana and give me Kool-Aid. That's another old reference for you
Yeah.
youngins. Jim Jones, look it up. And it just started working,
Who was the
It was
teacher?
Christina Jindali.
Okay, I've never heard of her.
She's a coach. She's
Okay.
lovely. And I was just following some of her, little YouTube videos. And I was just like, well, holy guacamole, I feel like $1,000,000. And so then I was, of course, doing therapy, and it goes on. And I'm like, obviously I can't have a relationship, right? This is what I'm deducing, right? Little young baby girl Mel is just like, well, okay, can't do that. It's over. Cause that's that, Catholic upbringing rearing its ugly head. And,
that's a whole nother episode.
That's a series, my friend.
Right.
So, and I realized, I was like, well, I don't really care. And I'm in the process of getting myself a pretty darn tootin' great life with my head back on straight. I was like, okay, I'll go coffee. And I had this like going around the clock situation, like first coffee, then lunch. I mean, I like me some structure, man. That's all that accounting background. And
well, when you live in an environment of chaos, structure makes you feel safe.
So good. And
yeah,
so
I mean, I'm the person that loves structure. I love a good routine. When I'm out of routine, it drives me insane because I feel like I have no control.
I just feel like I don't know what's happening. I mean, like to the point, like what day is it? Where am I? Especially being self-employed, I need my routine. And I also adore organizing. Are you like that too?
Me too. I love everything is so spotless in my house. People come to my house and they're like, it's like you live in a hotel, because my house is very spotless and I'm very organized. Everything has to have a place because my house growing up was chaos. I mean, even to this day, like my mom likes to hoard and keep a mess. And I'm just like, how could you live in such like, I just can't. I can't live in the chaos. I cannot. It's just not in me anymore. Thank God.
Now, here's a question. Once you get your organizational system, are you cool with letting it ride, or are you going to go back and reorganize it? I'm a reorganizer.
Sometimes.
Right? It's just like,
sometimes I reorganize. Sometimes I'm like, there's a better method.
Yes.
There's got to be a better method. I'm always doing that. I think about ways to do things faster. My husband's favorite saying is work smarter, not harder. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm always thinking of ways to do things faster. But yeah, like I never made that connection till now, that the reason why I am, I mean, I just thought I was a perfectionist because I was wanting my mother's attention and seeking that validation. So I strive to be like the straight A student, on honor roll, cheerleader, ASB, like first to graduate from high school to college without getting pregnant in between. Like I strive to be that person, but now it's all making sense why I cannot stand like a messy house or a messy kitchen. I always tell
Mm-hmm.
people your outer world reflects your inner world. And I remember the days
Sometimes.
what I remember the days when I was depressed and I would not wash the dishes for like 3 or 4 days and I wouldn't do my laundry for 2 weeks. And I didn't like that feeling of just sitting in
Mm-hmm.
that squalor. And I was just like, never again will I let myself get to that place.
It's interesting. I wax and wane. I think sometimes it depends, like, because I can be really focused on one thing to the expense of everything else, and that can go for, a couple days. That's like a solid minute where I'm just like, well, what do you mean you eat something other than protein bars? This is how I live now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm just like so focused on what I'm doing, especially when I'm writing. Because man, that's just so fun.
Oh.
It's yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to talking about you started to figure out that there was a program that was running you, obviously generational trauma, abuse, all that stuff. What were some of the things that you started to do that really like changed your trajectory of your life?
I mean, the fundamental understanding that I'm worth taking up space in the world. I mean, I had some very basic stuff to do. And, growing up in such a large family, and I'm older in the family, so I don't know if you experienced this too, but sort of like that hive mind, because it was
Mm,
what was ever better for the group. And
yeah.
anyone that would voice, well, what if we did this differently or as well? Or, that was just a recipe to get,
Yeah.
popped in the mouth.
Kicked out of
Yep.
the tribe or the village. That's
Which is the
definitely me. Like I'm
Yeah, and
like,
that's
wait
the
a minute,
fundamental
how
fear.
about we do this instead? And
Yeah.
it's hard for me not to raise my hand and be like, hey, guess what? We should do this. And I've given up the notion of trying to get them to understand because there's some people that just they're okay with
The status quo,
the status
baby.
quo. They're okay with that. It's hard to understand that some people love the toxic environment. They
Well,
thrive in it. They don't know anything different.
they don't know anything different.
Yes.
And we gravitate to what is familiar
Mm-hmm.
because it does
Absolutely.
feel like home. And so when you threaten, and that's the caveman mind as well, right? Because all that pre-linguistic, like that very early part of your brain knows is that you're alive right now because of all the things you did on the yesterdays. So let's just keep that.
Yeah.
Let's not change any of that. And that's a lot of times there's a visceral reaction to the possibility of change. I see that with my clients. I mean, I've always been up for changing what the heck ever. And by heck, I mean fuck, because it's like,
You could cuss.
come on. Thank goodness. My company is ZFG Living. It's zero fucks given living.
Oh, now I know what ZFG. I
Like,
love
don't
it.
give yourself away, right? Use your
Yeah.
resources. That's my whole shebang.
Oh, that's seriously such an incredible story. And it's like, I'm starting to hear more people wake up to the idea that, there is a program running us. And when I try to talk to people about it, they're like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And it's like, there are things that you're doing automatically, and
Mhm.
you learn these things automatically. And how did you learn them? By repetition. Tell me your ABCs right now. Everyone
Mhm.
say their ABCs, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Do you think you went to kindergarten and they taught you one time and they said, okay, now learn it for the rest of your life? No, they
Mhm.
repeated it over and over and over and over and over until it was just there. It's an automatic, thought process, just like tying your shoes, brushing your teeth, putting your pants leg on. So if they can do that to you, and I always say this, if an abuser can make you believe that you are not good enough and
Mhm.
unworthy and a piece of shit, why not use the same tactics to
Yeah.
tell yourself that you are good enough and that you are, a fearless female and that you can do everything that you put your mind to. It works both ways. It's just
It
as
totally
easy
does.
to be,
And
yeah, go
And
ahead.
I was going to say, I also say it's not just other people doing this to you. It's not like they're always, consciously programming you. We, as little people, are doing it to ourselves.
Mm,
And anybody who's dealt with a freaking toddler knows that that's not all right up in there. You're not finished cooking yet.
yeah,
So,
no.
you're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, and you're taking situations that are nuanced, that have different layers to them, that you don't know what's going on, and you're assimilating them, and as the little egomaniacs that we are, making it all about yourself. You're going to come up with some garbage, man.
Yeah, exactly. It it's a lot. People always don't understand that you really have to become a detective into be list like really figuring out, where did these limiting beliefs come from?
Hmm.
Why do I feel this way? Why do I think these thoughts, these negative thoughts? Why do I believe this? And it's on every aspect, money, relationships, why do you feel the way you feel about certain things, and you can easily transform your thoughts and change them into wanting to believe something different, that now you have the power. Yes, you didn't have the
Right.
power when you were a kid and you were stuck in that environment. But you have the power now to create whatever reality you want.
Yeah. And to me, like, easily is sort of, it's almost a misnomer, because
Hmm.
it's easy once you have identified what it is that you're trying to change and where it came from.
Yeah.
But until you recognize, like, is it from a parent, a caregiver, a peer, a teacher, like, because we take these slivers of little, seeming like innocuous seeming little scenes in our lives, and we extrapolate from that like this whole big rigid structure. And it's just like, well, no, maybe that teacher was just having a crappy day and has said some
Yeah.
off-putting BS. And but instead we're just like, well, if I ask for something that I want, then I'm not going to get it, therefore I must never ask for what I want. That's bad.
Hmm.
It's like,
Yeah. That's how the brain works. I'm going to deduce and I'm going to understand that, oh, if I act this way, then I'm going to get this punishment. If I'm going
every
to
time.
every single time, if I do this, then I'm going to get this. So as a little kid, you're just learning how to move through the world. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, these are the same patterns and the same belief systems that you are moving through the world now in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. And you don't know that you actually have a broken record that's like
Yeah.
making you repeat not just the patterns of your parents, but the people that you've surrounded yourself with. I started to recognize the same thing. I wasn't going through a divorce, but it was my second toxic relationship where
Hmm.
I had that aha moment where, like you said, you start to realize, oh, it's not them. It's
Right.
me. I'm the denominating factor in this
Oh yeah.
equation, right?
Yeah, because we're smart people. People are very smart. And so if you had a horrible first marriage, which I did, you pick someone who's the like absolute opposite, absolute in every way, different, different, different from that. And then you wind up with the same result and you feel the same crummy way and you don't want to be alive. Well, hang on a damn second. There are people way less resourceful, way less intelligent, way less everything than I am, who are living happily in the homes they've created. So
Mm,
how do I walk in those shoes and how do I follow that path? You don't have to be a rocket science to have a
yeah.
happy home life. Yeah, and
And I,
what am I missing?
yeah. And I love that you said earlier, when you said one of the very first things that you worked on was just knowing that you were allowed to take space in this world. And I
Yeah.
think there's so many of us that don't understand that we have this really sense of unworthiness, not enoughness, undeserving. And it's
Hmm.
that underlying issue that just is always traveling with us,
Right.
and if you don't get that underlying issue, no matter what you do, whether you get
Hmm.
the new job, the new car, you lose the weight, you get out of, debt, if you
But
still
if you
have
don't
that
think you're
underlying
worth it,
issue, yeah,
yeah, you're not going to keep it.
no, you're
So
going to go
I
right
use,
back.
yeah, I use vision boards with my clients. And part of what a vision board can do is make you feel that hopefulness and look forward to the future. But if you don't get your mindset right, then you're not going to manifest the goodness and be able to keep it because you don't have that architecture there, so to speak, that
Yeah.
mental framework.
Yeah, I have told this story many times for people who are listening. Is when I first did my vision board, I didn't fix that underlying issue of feeling
Mm.
worthy, good enough, deserving. And yeah, I got the boyfriend, the friend, the job. I got those things, the car, but I was still in toxic relationships. I was still had toxic friends, even a toxic work environment, because that was still my underlying, thought process pattern, limiting belief that I carried, and thoughts have this beautiful thing called energy. And it's
Yeah.
a frequency. And, if you're constantly putting out that energy and that frequency, you're going to
Then
attract the same people that are
absolutely.
in that energy and frequency.
That's what the universe thinks that you want. You're thinking about it all the time. That's why ruminating is so terrible, because you're just like over and over, you're going over whatever, oh, I said this wrong, or it's never, typically it's not, oh, I murdered the wrong person, right? It's not high stakes stuff that we go over and over and over again in our mind at 4
Yeah.
a.m., but that just primes us to see that more, do that more, attract more of that to us. And it's just like the Cherokee proverb, like, which wolf thrives, love or hate? The one you
Mhm.
feed.
Yes, absolutely. The one you feed. So tell me about your book, Big Book of Bad Ideas.
Well, since college, right? You're talking late 80s right there. We would always be doing some serious dumbassery, and we would joke around, and I'd be like, this is the introduction to the Big Book of Bad Ideas, and I even know why we're doing it,
Yeah.
because we want this attention, or we want that, to happen. And so it just sort of was always a joke in my mind. And then finally, when I got my mind right, so, if that's so simplistic to say, but that's what happened. I was like, I got to share this. Like, people need to understand that they're not, whatever it is, they're not the only person from an incestuous background, an
Mm,
abusive home. They're not the only person who slept in a car or had to be in these situations, place a baby for adoption because, they know they couldn't raise it and they weren't about to let their family have anything to do with it. And not that the family was interested, mind you. And so all of those things. And it's the journey of the book. Once I decided to do it, it happened really quickly. I did a lot of talk to text.
mhm.
And like you commented on how I choose words and make stuff up. And so I do a lot of that. And
Yeah.
so and the reason is, I find, or at least that's how I am, and so that's probably why I'm drawing these people to me, is that a
Yeah.
lot of survivors, we got some grit. We got some grit
Yeah.
on us, because life could just be a basket of shit. And so if you've been carrying that basket for a while, you're going to have some vocabulary to frame that, and to interject hopefulness for, from my people, and
Yeah.
to show them, like, I have a riotously great time every single day.
Yeah.
And I have absolutely zero business doing that based on how I grew up and how I lived decades of my life. And I'm not saying I have a song in my heart about every choice I've made. That would be a big fat lie. But I can give grace to myself and be like,
Yes.
well, it's a miracle that I like held a job. Like, I'm
Yeah.
a dang rock star,
Right?
And I don't think that we are kind to ourselves like that. And that's always part of what my message is. But, the book, I wrote the first book because I just wanted to show people that, whatever shenanigans you're up to, I've done probably something dumber. And this is why, and
Mhm.
connected back and say, like, hey, here's some things that you can try so that you're not doing that.
Yeah.
And so the Big Book of Bad Ideas is a series. The first one is Adulting from Anxiety to Zero Fucks Given. And it's all about, like, using your resources, not giving
Yeah.
yourself away. And then the second one's coming out, and it's about dating as an adult, because
Oh.
damn, if anybody's done it. And I say
Yes.
adult, I just mean like past that young, like in the 20s, when
Yeah.
that's like kind of what everyone's doing is coupling up. But once you get into the 30s and stuff,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that you're brutally honest and vulnerable. I think more people need to be brutally honest and vulnerable because you do. You need to realize that yeah, you made mistakes and you messed up. But you also, I always tell my clients when they start their program, it's always like by the second or third week, they're like, oh my God, I've messed up my children. I've messed up my life. I can't believe I've been doing this. And it's like, I get it. I get that feeling of guilt and shame. But you also have to understand when you didn't have the tools, of course you're going to make mistakes and fumble through life. Like I didn't have the tools. You didn't have the tools. You didn't even know that you were being programmed. You know what I mean? You had no
Right.
clue. And that's why you do need to give yourself grace. And you do need to say, hey, I'm sorry. I was a shitty mom. You know, I'm not a mom, but like, I mean, I'm a stepmom, but like I have nieces who are 4 years, 3 years younger than me. And I had one niece tell me, you know, you were a horrible aunt and you just treated me. And I had to swallow my pride and my ego and say, you're right. I was a horrible aunt. I honestly, I didn't have any examples on how to be a good aunt.
Right.
I didn't know what my responsibilities were. And I was just like trying to survive life too, you
Yeah.
know, and I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the knowledge. I'm a different person now. And I hope that you can forgive me and I will prove to you how different I am. Because I always tell people, you know, forgiveness is one thing, but change behavior is a whole nother thing.
Oh,
So
big
I
time.
could say I'm sorry, but if my behavior stays the same, obviously I wasn't really sorry. But I
Right.
know that like I am a different person now. And I think that, you know, I love that your honesty on your book because there's so many things that we've done and if you're part of a toxic environment, it's normal. It's
Exactly. A
normal for
hundred
people
percent.
to do stuff like that. You know, it's normal to get blackout drunk. It's normal to, you know, do drugs and sleep
And
with
just be a
and
horrible bully. Like
and
all of the
basically,
things.
I was an awful human being. Like my
Mhm.
husband always, when we first got together, for the first year, he'd be like, "Oh my God, I wish I would have met you when you were 28. I wish." No, you wouldn't
Oh
have. I was
no.
an awful woman. I was
Mm-mm.
awful. I was like deep in my own like pain. And when wounded people are wounded, they want to wound others. And so you wouldn't have wanted to be around me. But yeah, like you have to forgive the person that was completely, I call her, she was offline. She was
Oh, I like that.
offline.
Yeah.
You know, she was offline. She had no clue. She was just an NPC running the world until she had her soul awakening. And now I'm a completely different person and I'm more conscious of people's feelings and what I say. Because, you
Hmm.
know, like you say, you could say something flippant and you're having a bad day, and that could stay with that person forever, you
A
know?
100%.
And
Oh yeah.
I used to say things all the time that were awful. I mean, I remember one time I told this guy that he had ugly teeth. And I kid you not, he came to me about a year or 2 years later and he said, "Guess what? I got my teeth fixed." And I'm like,
Oh
"Well,"
my.
and in my mind, I was like, "Well, good for you." You know, I just didn't even think of it. Back then, I was probably at a bar drinking. I was like, "Well, good for you."
Right.
I didn't even think of it. And he goes, "No, because you told me 2 years ago that I had ugly teeth." I was like, "I did. I am so sorry." Like, I'm so sorry. That's the thing. The things that you say affect people, and the things that you say to yourself also affect you, right?
Oh, 100%. And also, what you say to others, you're proving to yourself what kind of person you are. And it's as if your subconscious is that toddler watching, 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 soaking it up and watching, watching, watching. And even though, like, getting the mindset straight, right? Getting that subconscious in order, believe me, every time I'm ready to level up, new level, new devil, man.
Mm,
It's like, oh, we're going to change. Can we change back to how we were? And it's
yeah.
like, oh, hell no. Mm-mm.
Yeah, it always tries to drag you back to where it's comfortable, the emotional home of that. Yeah, I've had many times where it's like, okay, I'm ready to level up, and my inner child is like, no, we're gonna like wreak havoc, and
Right.
we're
And then
not
you
gonna
get
do
like
this.
physically sick. And I
Yes.
mean, it's crazy how interconnected it is.
It is. It's so interconnected. Okay, so as we wrap up this episode, I've had such an incredible conversation with you. I could talk to you for hours, because I'm sure you have many stories. As we wrap up this episode, what would be your nugget of wisdom for anyone listening today?
Do not give yourself away. Know who you are, stand in your power. You don't You don't have to exchange yourself. Pleasant, helpful, and pretty is not the rent you pay in the world. Do not give yourself away.
Oh, I love that. Pleasant, helpful, and pretty is not how you pay the rent. Oh, that is so beautiful. Okay, how can my audience find you?
Always, baby, come to zfgliving.com. Find me on social media. I'm melissatrumble.zfg on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm told I'm on TikTok. I'm not 100% clear on that. But you can always email me as well, melissa@zfgliving.com. And check out my books on Instagram. On what's that that Jeff
Amazon.
Bezos dude? Yeah,
Jeff
the billionaire
Bezos.
guy on Amazon.
Yeah. And the name of your podcast?
ZFG Living Podcast. I was
All
very
right.
original. I know.
No, it's good. Good branding. Thank you again for listening to Journey of a Fearless Female. I'm your host, Paola Rosser. If you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual mentor, you can book a free discovery call with me at www.fearlessfemale.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at fearlessfemale_coach, subscribe to my YouTube channel at fearlessfemale, or find me on TikTok. I'm under at paola.rosser. And if you love this episode, make sure you hit subscribe, share it with your friends, and leave a review. I read every single review, and I truly appreciate the time you spend writing it.